Today we're in Magnolia Cemetery on March 12th of 2021, and today is Michael Krafft's birthday. I'd like to thank South Alabama Library's Art Galleries for taping this talk, and we're out here to celebrate Michael Krafft's birthday. Michael Krafft was born in Bristol, Pennsylvania in 1807. That would make him 214 years old today. Came to Mobile sometime in the mid 1820s, along with some of his family. His older brother John can be found in Mobile at that time, and also his sister, Ann Church Krafft, who was married to a guy by the name of Benjamin Vincent. Some people may find that familiar. The Mobile Medical Museum building on Spring Hill Avenue was built as a summer home for Benjamin Vincent and his wife, Ann Krafft Vincent. But today we're talking about Michael Krafft. Krafft came to Mobile mostly for business purposes. The cotton trade had started to build, and there was opportunities for business in the city, and so many from that area came to Mobile for just that purpose. We're going to talk about why we're talking about Krafft today. In 1831, and there's, let me say this, there are many different stories about what Michael Krafft did. It includes several different ship names, including several hardware stores, and several years in which he did it. But the story that I'm going to share today is one that I've documented as close to the time with actual documentation that I found in doing research on Krafft. On Christmas Day night in 1831, which was a Sunday night, by the way, Krafft was invited to partake in Christmas Day dinner with one of the ship captains, a guy by the name of Post, whose boat, the Tuscany, was in port, being most likely loaded with cotton. Most of the cotton was picked in the late summer, early fall. It made its way to the warehouses in Mobile, and people like Krafft were there to make sure that not only did it get picked, it got transported, and then it was then put on ships, and most of that was taken to Liverpool, England, for processing. So Krafft was on board with Post, and after they'd had their dinner and a few drinks, they decided to leave the ship. And as they left the ship, they found it was light rain falling in Mobile, and so Krafft donned a oilcloth cape to keep the water off of him, and there was an old saber laying on the deck that he tied to his waist, and he and Post and made it on shore from the waterfront and headed into the city. They came across a hardware store, most likely Joe Hall's hardware store, in which Krafft took cowbells, tied them to the ends of a rake, and then proceeded, him and Post, to go through the city bringing those cowbells. After a while, he had brought a large number of people in, from indoors, outdoors, and so he got quite a few people. After it was over, there was a lot of talk in the city about what he had done. It was not unusual what Krafft did, because Krafft was European, and many of the Europeans that settled in the Northeast brought some of their traditions with them, which included mummery and masking on Christmas Day night and also on New Year's Eve. And so Krafft was most likely doing just exactly what he had experienced while he lived in Pennsylvania. So the city was in a buzz about what had happened. There may have been some controversy if he did actually done that on Sunday night, because typically the Sabbath was not a day for celebration. And so everybody wondered if he would repeat himself on New Year's Eve. And so on New Year's Eve in 1831, he and a bunch of his other friends got together, making their own costumes up, and proceeded to parade through the streets of Mobile, ringing cowbells, strumming on banjos and guitars, and using tin pans as drums. They came up to the mayor's house, in which he invited them in to partake in some refreshment. And it was not the only house that they went to that night. They also stopped in on a guy by the name of Original George Davis. And the reason why George Davis called himself Original George Davis is apparently there were several George Davises in Mobile at that time, and he wanted everybody to know that he was the first and original George Davis. And so the Cowbellions stopped in also that evening to visit George Davis, and may have made other stops along the way. So after the success of the 1831 New Year's Eve, Krafft and his friends decided to organize and give their little group a name, and they called themselves originally the Cowbellion de Rakin Society. It was later shortened to Cowbellion de Rakin Society for most of their history. They started inviting other members to join, and so as Mobile grew in the 1830s, so did the Cowbellions. The ranks swelled, people got involved, and by the late 1830s, Krafft and the Cowbellions had begun to order their costumes from Paris, France. So they went from having homemade costumes. In fact, the first night there was no masking. The masking, the idea of a mystery started in 1832. But their first year they didn't even wear masks. But for the most part, they during the 1830s they had their own costumes. So Mobile kind of grew with that, and Krafft as being in the cotton business, and it was other things that Krafft was involved in, but mainly he was in the cotton business. He would travel, many of them would travel through the Black Belt area and the Gulf Coast area, and they would conduct their business. Well, in 1839, most likely while conducting business, Krafft was in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and he came down with yellow fever. And on October 5th of 1839, Michael Krafft died from yellow fever and was buried in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So you wonder, so why are we sitting in Magnolia Cemetery in Mobile if Michael Krafft was buried in Pascagoula, Mississippi? Well, in December, in particular December 20th of 1840, Michael Krafft's body was brought back from his grave in Pascagoula and reburied at this present site. When he was buried, this monument was not here. The monument came later in 1852, but he was buried here, I believe, on Christmas Day. Although I've not found any evidence of that, there are some things that the Cowbellions did during their history that would lead somebody to believe that perhaps it was Christmas Day that he was buried. cemetery. I personally believe they were honoring Krafft and what he started in 1831. So by 1840, the Cowbellions now are led by a new leader. His name was George Huggins, and the Cowbellions upped their celebration by adding floats to their and a theme to their parade. It's the first themed parade in in mystic history in the United States. They used the theme of heathen god and goddesses, and most likely had wagons that had transparencies painted on it, much like you would see in the theater, and it was torchlit. So the city was then entertained by the Cowbellions in a totally different way, almost like a play in the streets, and that would continue on for years and years. So Huggins continues on until he dies in 1852, and in 1852, the Cowbellions and most likely others decided to put monuments at the graves of both Michael Krafft and George Huggins. And that's where this one came into play. If you look at the bottom here, you'll see that you see the name J. Turner. J. Turner was Jarvis Turner. He was also a Cowbellion who was enlisted by the Cowbellions to engrave both this monument and the one for Huggins. And you can also find the same name on Huggins' grave. So why do we look at Michael Krafft? Michael Krafft should be considered the father of all the mystics, including Mardi Gras. And the reason why I say that is because the Cowbellions themselves had a huge part in getting Mardi Gras established, not only in New Orleans, but also in Mobile. There was 5 Cowbellions and 1 striker who formed the group, the Mystic Crew of Comus, which still exists in New Orleans, based on the model from the Cowbellions. In fact, they used a lot of their props and their costumes in doing their Mardi Gras celebration in 1857. And so that was transplanted with the OOMs, which most of their membership was made up of Cowbellions. And so Krafft strolled through Mobile in 1831, pretty much led us to where we are now. So we're today here in Magnolia Cemetery celebrating Michael Krafft's birthday, the father of all the mystics.